And there at the bottom, I want you, and this you can do this just on paper, it's just very simple. You want to list the planets, or the luminaries, remember the sun and the moon, in the order that they rise over the horizon. So we're looking at this chart now. I have no planets in there to look at, but I want you to see the idea that when planets are moving this way, they're coming up to the horizon. Who's going to come across the horizon first? Who's going to come second? Who's going to come third? And of course, we're going to do each of them, right, all the way through 10 of them. And what this is going to tell us is it's going to tell us the planet in ruling what time span of years in your life. So the first planet rising, you're going to see its influence in a child's life from birth to 9 years of age. And then right around 9, and just the really basic, if you know anyone in the group here who's just on the verge of changing decades, if you have a 10-year-old that's turning 11, if you have a 19-year-old turning 20, if you have a 29-year-old turning 30, you're all going through a big shift right now because you're going from one planetary influence into another. And that alone makes great cocktail conversation, by the way. Remember, astrology is very much an oral tradition. And not that we like to only do it in cocktail parties, but the idea is in social situations, it's a very easy tool to pull out of your back pocket, so to speak. Once you know you had a birthday party and the person's turning 40, whoa, you know, maybe you haven't seen their charts, you maybe can't say what, but you know there's big changes. It's always a safe thing to say to anybody who's having a birthday at a decade. You're in for big changes, and they probably have already begun in the 6 months prior. So here we go, ruling planet of a decade. This is the process. So it's very dry, so to speak, very laid out. This process, I put etc. because this goes on. Fourth planet is going to rule, 30 to 39, and it just goes on that way. So let's just take a chart, and of course I picked on Barack Obama. And those of you in the back, I do apologize. You may find we're going to be looking at a few charts. I'm sure the viewing is better down front than it is in the back, but I'm going to try to make it easy for everyone, no matter where you're sitting here today. And so do you catch what I've done here? The arrows, now we've learned the basics here. We know the horizon. We know what we're looking for. We know the planets are moving clockwise. So we start looking down here to see what's the first planet or luminary that's going to come up and hit that ascendant. Now, I just put a little trick in here just because to get your eye accustomed to it. Sometimes there's things on charts that aren't luminaries and they're not planets. In this example, we have a part of fortune, which would represent where the person does well in life. Okay, so we're going to dismiss that part of fortune that we see here sitting in the second house, and we're going to pull the moon up. So the moon, you can see this, the moon's going to be the first thing to rise up. So the moon comes up first, and then we can see Venus, I put it as number 1, Mercury as number 2, the sun is number 3, Uranus is number 4, Pluto is number 5, Mars is number 6, Neptune is 7, Saturn is 8, and Jupiter is 9. So there we have the planets. Now to make it easy, of course, you can see what I did off the right side. I just made it really clear for those maybe who can't read exactly, but I've just taken planets in the order that they're going to rise. Now here's the key. Some of you may be thinking this. Well, what if one planet moves faster than the other ones? One going to overtake one? No. Just read it flat. Just read it like they're all moving at the same rate. So moon comes first, Venus, you get the idea. So before I go on, this is my one point. I'm not going to allow for a lot of questions in the midst of this presentation, but this is the one window because I want to make sure the majority of you are now thinking. We've introduced the idea of the horizon, where it is in a chart. We're looking at planets that are moving and which ones are going to come across, rise this ascendant, and in what order. And if you do it, you end up with a little chart like this. You can do it on your own chart. You can do this on anybody's chart. But you do need the time of birth. Do you see this one? So this one is not a great one to do a solar chart where you're just going to put the sun on the horizon. There's probably some validity to it, but I would not go there. This would only work well when you know the time of birth, because the time of birth is going to dictate the order of the planets, where they are in relationship to the ascendant. Okay. I'm not seeing a lot of hands go up, so I'm going to make a big assumption here that the majority are catching what we're doing here. So because now this is really where the fun starts. So let's take President Obama's chart, and let's just key in. In his 40s, reading this, in his 40s, he moved into a Uranus decade, the ages of 40 to 49 years of age. So what do we know about a Uranus decade? A Uranus decade is a little unpredictable. It generally is very liberating. Oftentimes people do things that they've never done before. They haven't shown aptitude to be interested in, even to take them on as projects. They're very independent. People might be turned off that all of a sudden the person thinks they can be something or do something that maybe technically they've had no real background training in. I always say this is self-ordaining. It's a self-ordaining decade, where you say, and I'm going to be oversimplified, you wake up one morning and say, I can do that. And you go about doing it. That's the amazing part. So here's my key words. I said you differentiate yourself. You stand out. You pull yourself away and say, on some level, I am different. I am enlightened. I'm ordained. And again, other people, you know what the reaction can be. You embrace independence. You gravitate to technology. You identify with groups or movements. Now, you're very interested in separating yourself, but at the same time, you have to find a new group, right? None of us want to be solo alone, so we jump over and say, you know what, I'm going to go into sales and marketing. And I've always been a bookkeeper. And that's quite a drastic change. Now you've got to find those other salespeople and hang with them. You break the mold, you succeed in very unlikely ways, and you generally move multiple times. And here's the key thing. In a Uranus decade, you create out of chaos. There must be chaos. You love chaos. And it's a sign that you're on to something. So when you move into a Uranus decade. So let's come back to Barack Obama's chart, just to see it. And you know, in order to convey the concept, I need, of course, someone that we all can relate to, or at least know a lot of things out in the press. We've lived this with him, correct? We've lived his 40 to 49 with him. So here he comes. At age 40, he moved into it. I didn't research that, but there should have been something very strong that he did at that point that kind of was a jumped track, so to speak, went off in a different direction. But we certainly know what happened as he became president in 2008. And I think I'd have everyone's hand if I said, who in this group in 2006 would have said that Barack Obama would become president of the United States? And I suspect the majority of us would not be raising our hand. It was out of the blue. Certainly even at 2007, we didn't think that could possibly happen. He broke a mold. He self-ordained himself. He said, I can do this. I will show you. So we see this idea. And then as he, and catch, he's now 52, I believe, 52 now. So he's now moved on to his next decade. But look what happened around the closing. Always look at the beginning of the decade and the close of the decade for two major statements about events in a person's life that will reflect the planetary ruler of the decade. In 2010, he got healthcare reform pushed through. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that after seeing what has happened in the past? Who would have thought he would have got that through as well? So I just want you to see it's Uranian. And those of you who heard the lecture last month, remember Uranian, they're always wanting to change things. They're very sensitive to everyone. We want to bring everyone along with us, not just the elite. We want to bring everyone. So again, and I'm just, there's no political comments here, but he is associated with socialism. That's one of his common attacks that he gets. You're a socialist. That's a Uranian. If you have a strong Uranus in your chart, if you have a strong 11th house in your chart, that's how you think. You think of the broad spectrum. You're not so niche-oriented. You're thinking about, okay, this is good for me, but where's the win-win for that person over there as well? So again, that is kind of, we see this where the socialist aspect can come from the chart. So there he is. He's currently 51. He's out of the Uranus energy. And again, we'll be talking about his chart as we come up to his next decade here. But there's definitely a sobering that's gone on. I think we all would agree in his demeanor. He's now can no longer get away with Uranian things. Uranian is being the odd person. Now he needs to temper down. Right now he needs to do more management things. That may give you a clue as to what planetary energy he's come under.